Let's talk about courage and hope. The courage to act when faced with challenges, and the hope that such courage creates. This is what Right Livelihood laureates do every day. This interview presents one of the 4 2022 Right Livelihood laureates and their fight for a better future for all. Let them inspire you. Hope is what we create when we take action together.
Welcome to this interview series with 2022 Right Livelihood laureates. In these 30-minute conversations, we will explore their work and methods and learn more about the motivation behind their commitment. This is How to Mobilise Change, the Courage to Act. And for this conversation, I'm extremely honored to be joined by Oleksandra Matviichuk, Chairwoman of the Center for Civil Liberties and 2022 Right Livelihood laureate.
Nice to meet you.
So I was hoping we could start with the founding of the Center for Civil Liberties in 2007. At that time, why did you see the need for such an organization? What role did you envision it was going to have in the future of Ukraine?
Center for Civil Liberties was established in 2007 as an initiative of several Helsinki Commission in our OSCE region, because for that moment Ukraine demonstrated maybe the one single positive trend in the post-Soviet space. After Orange Revolution, we have going to the path to democratization, and this was like initial goals for Helsinki Commission to establish some organization which will work not only in Ukraine issue but more globally in OSCE region. And I myself was on that days a young human rights lawyer, and I was involved in youth activity for years before and struggling to fight for human rights and against injustice.
What drew you to law in particular as an instrument for social change?
When we speak about instrument of social change, the main instrument is belief of people. Because like in many parts of the world, people face with extremely difficult challenges, and sometimes even their efforts can seem they have no senses. I have my own experience on this. During the Revolution of Dignity, I, together with my team, created civil initiative Euromaidan SOS. We provided legal assistance and other kind of aid for all persecuted protesters. And that day, we faced with the whole state machine, because paramilitary groups work together with police. Police cooperate with courts. The former president, former government, and majority of parliament were against us. They want to liquidate peaceful protests, even physically. And in that time, it was very easy to say, what I can do? The law not exist at all. But because our lawyers and our volunteers of our initiative struggle very honestly for each person, for each procedure's measures, we start to work not only on legal level, but on symbolical level, on level of senses, on level of values. And every people in Maidan know that there is no guarantee. You can be arrested, you can be kidnapped, you can be tortured, you even can be killed. But there are people who will never leave you alone, who will fight for you. And this understanding provide peaceful movement a courage to continue the struggle.
I wanted to talk a little bit more about Euromaidan. How did your organization decide that this was a fight that it was important to have, and how were you able to mobilize?
I will tell you the story of creation of Euromaidan SOS, and it's explained a lot. On this 30th of November, we have to conduct a seminar for regional activists across the country. We gathered them because we're fighting with a police database which police tried to use against civil activists, journalists, human rights defenders, etc. But several hours before the seminar started in the night, police brutally dispersed peaceful student demonstrations. And when I came to the place where the seminar has to be held on, I found people very frustrated, very disappointed. Nobody know what we can do, and for sure we will not conduct a seminar anymore. But I will tell them, I was tell them, let's think what we can do additionally. Just go in and do protest. We as a human rights defenders, maybe we can invent something essential how to contribute into the situation. And we very clearly understood that there is a gap between people who suffered that night, because several dozens people were arrested, people were disappeared, people were beaten, and people who can provide them legal assistance. So we established a Facebook page. We called it Euromaidan SOS, and we made a first post. If you were beaten, if your relatives were arrested or disappeared, please call to us. We will provide you legal aid pro bono. And it was a very risky moment, because among us there were no lawyers with license who can present people in the court. I myself human rights lawyer, but I have no permission to go in criminal case. So 30 seconds after this, we made a second post. If you're an attorney, if you are lawyers, if you want to provide legal aid pro bono, please call us and we contact you. And it was a miracle, because we see how this post was widespread very widely, very quickly, and we start receiving calls from people who suffered, people who want to provide assistance, and we start to connect them. And I remember very clearly that day, we was sure that we established this mechanism, Euromaidan SOS initiatives, to provide legal assistance to persecuted students who were dispersed on that night. But even a nightmare, I have never imagined that we work 24 hours a day, 3 months, that every day hundreds of people who were beaten, who were arrested, who were tortured, who were accused and fabricated criminal or administrative charges path through our care, and then later we will work with relatives of people who were killed. We was the first human rights organization who sent mobile groups to Crimea and to Luhansk and Donetsk region. We sent it in the end of February 2014, because this war, which Russia started against Ukraine, started not in February 2022, but in February 2014. And I will be very honest, for that moment, we have no idea that the war started. Now it seems very understandable that when authoritarian regime collapsed and Ukraine obtained a chance for a quick democratic transformation, in order to stop us on this way, Russia started this war. But for that moment, for us, after 3 months of struggling against the authoritarian corrupt regime of Viktor Yanukovych, it wasn't so visible. So we sent mobile groups to Crimea, to Lugansk, Donetsk region, and we start to document human rights violations and war crimes with a special focus on practice of illegal detention, torture, sexual violence, killing civilians, and as well as criminal motivated political persecutions. And I myself personally interviewed more than hundreds of people who survived captivity. I spoke with people who told me how they were beaten, how they were raped, how their fingers were cut, how they were smashed into wooden boxes, how their nails were torn away, how their nails were drilled, how they compelled to write with their own blood. One woman told me how her eye were dug out with a spoon. So it's really horrible stories which continued all this 8 years, and we have no influence to stop it. We sent numerous reports to UN, to OSCE, to Council of Europe, to European Union, but nothing changed. And then in 2017, we changed our strategy. we said to ourselves, okay, if international system is not work, we will rely upon on people. And we launched global campaign, Save Oleksandra, to release arrested Ukrainian film producer Oleksandra and other political prisoners. And we built international network in 35 countries of the world, and we established the synchronized demonstrations in 35 countries of the world with demands not to the abstract Putin, but to their own government. And this may change. We started to put on the table between Ukrainian authorities that Ukraine has to ratify Rome Statute immediately after a change of authoritarian regime of Viktor Yanukovych. It was a beginning of the war, because we want to be guaranteed as a Ukrainian people that each political parties which obtain power, regardless of their ideology or color, will never persecute peaceful protesters, will never gunning down peaceful protesters in the center of Kiev. We want to avoid it. And now it's even become more actual, because we faced with a numerous amount of Russian war crimes. And Ukrainian national legal system couldn't cope with this huge amount by themselves. So the results of our campaign was that Ukrainian parliament sent a declaration to International Criminal Court, and they recognize the jurisdiction of International Criminal Court, and that's why International Criminal Court now have ability to conduct investigation. And also, because of our campaign and our efforts, we convince our parliament to change constitution. And we make amendment to constitution which provide a possibility to Ukraine to ratify Rome Statute. But it's still not happened yet, so we continue our struggle.
Since you were talking earlier about, the feeling that the international system had failed Ukraine in the aftermath of the Crimea invasion, how did you kind of restore your faith in the ability of in the International Criminal Court as, an institution that could provide justice going forward?
We closely cooperate with International Criminal Court all this year, and we sent several reports devoted to different aspects of war crimes. And now, when the ICC started a full investigation, we exchange information. So we provide information which International Criminal Court needed for its investigation. But the problem is much more deeper, because when we speak about International Criminal Court, their activity is very essential, but they limit itself only to several select cases. Hence, there is a question on the table: who will provide justice for hundreds of thousands of victims who will not be lucky to be selected by International Criminal Court? And this is a question on which we are working for current moment.
Would you like to speak more about what your thinking is in this regard and what other solutions you think there might be?
Yes, it's a very practical question for me as a human rights lawyer and for human being, because I work directly with people, and I know for sure that people who survived through the hell, they need to restore not only their broken life, broken families, broken vision of the future, they need to restore their belief that justice is possible, even though delayed in time. And in order to do it, we need to establish a complex justice strategy, because what we have during the war turned people into the numbers. And I start to notice even by myself that I speak more with numbers than with names, because the scale of war crimes grows so large that it's become impossible to recognize all the stories. And only justice returns people their names, because justice, restore everything what happened with him or her, details of the life story. So they return names, which means they return human dignity. And that's why I'm sure we must find a way how to provide a chance for justice to each victims of war crimes, regardless of who they are, what's their social position, what types of crime they endured, and whether or not media or international organization or society are interested in their cases, because life of each person matters.
How did the full invasion of Ukraine in 2022 change your and the center's work?
We face with enormous amount of crimes, which means that we face with enormous level of pain. We document not on violation of Geneva Conventions. We document pure human pain. Human pain when Russians deliberately shelling on residential buildings, churches, schools, hospitals, attacks evacuation corridors, manage filtration camp systems, organize forcible deportations, commit murder, rape, abduction, torture, and other kinds of offenses against civilians. And this pain, I must admit, is something materialized, because you can even feel how this pain makes you burnt out. And I couldn't answer to a question properly because I forbidden to myself to ask what I feel, what is my emotion is about. It's reflection, which is very necessity, but I postpone it for future, because now we're in a war, and we're in a long marathon, which we have to do in a very high speed, and we need energy to do it. So we will make reflection after. People provides me energy. When large-scale invasion started, I had two main feelings. The first feelings was anger. I was so angry to Russians because, for 8 years, we're struggling hard to build a sustainable democratic institutions parallel defined in our country. We struggling as a people just for a chance to build the country where the rights of everybody are protected, government is accountable, judiciary is independent, and police do not beat peaceful students' demonstration as they did before on Maidan. And we contribute enormous amount of our skills, energy to fight for our democratic choice. And now Russians decided that they have a right to stop us and to deprive us from our democratic choice. And so I was unbelievably angry. But parallel, the feeling was, and which started to be dominated, it was a feeling of love. When international organizations evacuated their staff from Kiev and to other more safe oblasts or to abroad, it was ordinary people who stepped into their functions. It was common people who rescue others, who trampled under the rubble of residential buildings. It was common people who suffered under artillery fires. It was common people who tried to break encirclement with humanitarian aid and provide them to people in the siege cities and settlements by Russians' army. It was common people who do unbelievable things and risk their lives for others whom they have never met before. And it's a huge wave of solidarity which unites people. And it's make me feel of love, because I think that in these dramatic times, which I have never wished any nations to go through, we start very sharply to understand what does it mean to be human beings.
In times of war, there's often kind of a rally around the flag mentality that, can often suppress, valid criticism of one's own government. In the context of Ukraine, where you've been fighting to make sure that your own government is accountable, does that work get harder when you're also defending the country from external attack?
it's make our work as a human rights defender harder, because we have to obtain a victory. And what does it mean, victory, for Ukrainians? It's not only to repeal all Russian troops from Ukrainian territories and to release completely Kherson region, Lugansk, Donetsk regions, as well as Crimea. It means that we have to succeed in democratic transformations and to build a sustainable democratic institutions. And during the war, there is always a temptation to become a mirror or adversary side. And that's why we have to be very cautious, very careful, to be in line with the values which we are declare. And this is a very important task for human rights defender, for Ukrainian civil society, and for the country at all. Because we are fighting for values. And this war has a value dimension. This is not the war between two states, Russia and Ukraine. It's a war between two systems, authoritarianism and democracy. And win this war and transfer themselves into authoritarian Russia, there is no sense. We will never succeed if human rights will be protected only by human rights lawyers, human rights defenders, experts, or diplomats. We have to involve ordinary people into the struggle. So we will succeed only each people will be able and eager to protect their human rights and freedoms. And this means that we have to build a special mechanism how to involve society into human rights work.
Do you think that the events of the past year or so have made the desire for democracy stronger in Ukraine? Or have they presented more challenges for the future than they have opportunities?
The situation is complex, but in this complex situation, each people in Ukraine know what we are fighting for. I had a conversation with my colleague, she is journalist, Natalia Gumenyuk, and she told that she was in Kryvyi Rih and made some interviews about Russian atrocities with some plant workers. And she asked them, for what we are fighting for? And this guy answered to her that we are fighting for freedom. For example, for freedom of speech. And Natalia told, I was so deeply touched because it's the answer which you can expect from some professors or from human rights defenders or for politicians or for diplomats, but it was a workers on the plant and he knows that we are fighting for freedom of speech in this war. It's fantastic.
How did you feel when you found out you had received the Right Livelihood Award?
I was surprised first, and then I was happy. It was first emotions, and we received the Right Livelihood Awards and this recognition during the war, and that's why I personally feel a huge responsibility. During Revolution of Dignity, at the end, police gunning down peaceful demonstrators and killed more than 100 people. Among them, it was 19-year-old student Roman Hurek. They all were killed unarmed. They killed them because they can. And on the court, I heard his mother. And his mother told a very difficult story because she starts that when her child was killed and she received his bag, he found in his bag the paper from candies because her son was so polite that he never thrown paper for candies away, even in such mess which was going on that days. But then she told something which touched me very, very severe. She told, as a mother, I don't want to let my son to go to Maidan because, like, as a mother, I'm afraid for his safety, for his liberty, for his life. But I remembered that I myself stood on Maidan during Orange Revolution only 10 years ago and fighting for freedom and for human dignity. And I had no moral life to stop my son and refused him in his right to let go, and she let him go. So Ukraine, in a peace for me, it's Ukraine where our children have no need to do such things, to go to the protest on Maidan and to raise their voice for freedom and for human dignity. And that's why I speak about responsibility, because our generation have to be successful in complete this historical task. We have no moral rights to reload it, this duty to our children.
One last question. Thinking about, say, the next year, what is kind of one specific thing that you think, positive but achievable thing that you're hoping to achieve?
We are in a war. That's why I will start with very with very simple things. First, we need to survive. Because, okay, I don't know how my personal story will end. I'm sure that Ukraine will resist and freedom will prevail. But if I speak about me and personally, first things is to survive. And second, now we have every day in our Facebook page commemorations of my friends, my colleagues who joined army after large-scale invasion and were dead, were killed. These people provides us a time, and my second goal to use this time effectively, because they paid for this time with their lives.
Thank you so much for sharing.